G'day ladies and gents, and welcome back to Star Citizen with Mags, and today no live gameplay from the PTU or anywhere else. Today we're taking a look at the 2016 Gamescom presentation that Chris Roberts live demoed in front of several hundred audience members and around 40,000 people on Twitch simultaneously, and this is actually, this isn't even from the next patch that we will be getting on the Star Citizen live server. This is actually from patch, what would have been called 2.7, but is now called patch 3, which is what we'll be getting after that. We should be receiving this by the end of the year. And it's, we're starting to see what Star Citizen was actually going to look like. Now, you're going to have to bear with me for a little bit here, because this is a discussion that I've wanted to have for a long time, but I wasn't entirely sure how to approach it. And I'm mainly going to be talking about Star Citizen's development at this point. So, when I first started covering Star Citizen on the channel about 5 months ago, I came at it from a little bit of a critical standpoint on my first two videos, and I thought that was very much warranted. I wanted to take a blind look at what Star Citizen was to see whether or not, at its current standard at that moment, I could find value. I didn't want to ride the hype train at all. I just wanted to look at what was actually there and whether or not it was worth being a part of at that time. If yes, then we can start considering the hype train as an option. If no, we'll come back in 6 months and see what happens. And I was pleasantly surprised by what I found. The ship designs were well done, the physics was good. It wasn't alpha, it was a little buggy, but there was definitely content there. In fact, I've spent $45 on games that have far less content than Star Citizen's alpha was offering. Actually, recently, I think I spent $60 on a game that has far less content, but let's not go into that here. There's a whole other video I'm going to have to make on that one. But anyways, I found what I was looking for, enough to take a look at the game, and then I started looking at it more and digging into the background development, and I started to realize very quickly that what we were seeing of the game's development at that moment isn't actually where the developers are up to, or at least what we had access to. Now, originally I think I had exactly the same feeling as many of the people out there that are heavily critical of Star Citizen, that the current public available PU is the standard development point. It's where Star Citizen is actually up to. But looking through their own dev blogs, it became very apparent very quickly that the current PU that we have access to is just a test server, and it's well behind where the development is actually up to. In fact, my estimates were somewhere in the vicinity of 6 months behind at a very bare minimum, possibly more in other areas. This has basically been confirmed to us at Gamescom this weekend just been, with what has been possibly the most fantastic demonstration of gameplay I have ever had the privilege to witness. Seriously, if you have not watched this stream yet, pause this video right here, and I'm going to put the link to the stream that I'm using as background footage right now in the video description below. Click on it, go watch the stream. It'll take you about 55 minutes to watch the whole thing from start to finish. It is well worth your time. It was impressive. Now, a couple of things you need to remember for those of you who have watched it or those who have just returned back from watching it. That isn't actually where the developers are up to. Okay, so the current version of the universe that we have is about to go out of date. Anywhere within the next few days out to the next week, we are, or possibly fortnight, we're due to receive an upgrade to the next version of the public test server. This will give us a new version of the PU. We're going to get a new criminal base called Grim Hex. There's going to be a whole bunch of new features that are added in, and a lot of bug fixing as well, to be expected in an update. However, that's not this version, that's just our next update. What you're watching on screen at the moment, that is the update after that. Now, we're probably not going to receive this update until near the end of this year. That's when this update is supposed to be available to us, give or take. We're probably looking at October, probably just past CitizenCon is a likely area, possibly into November. However, watching the interviews after this particular stream with Chris Roberts, and he said something that really caught my attention. This isn't the build that Star Citizen or Cloud Imperium Games is actually working on at the moment. They are working on a build after this one, which they are going to show a demonstration of at CitizenCon this year. Which means we're not even watching up-to-date footage on their current development. This is not their current development build, this is their old build. It just hasn't made its way down to us yet. They're working on the next one. So at this point I'm sure you're asking yourself, why does any of this matter? Well, it comes down to a lot of the criticism that's been levelled at Chris Roberts, Cloud Imperium Games, and Star Citizen as well, its development. A lot of that criticism seems to be based on what we've been able to see in the persistent universe at this point, and that it's not matching up to the amount of money that has been delivered to the game or the amount of time that the game has had available. But what we see in this presentation is that Chris Roberts has actually been developing a lot of stuff that he has not been showing us behind the scenes. Huge amounts of it. In fact, some of the stuff that he has been showing us, he's actually been being rather cheeky about. For example, it was only about a week to a fortnight ago that we got a video on the Star Citizen official YouTube page. Now, they release about 4 videos to 5 videos every week showing different aspects of the development of Star Citizen to keep their backers and their pledges and anybody who's just interested in general up to date on how far the development is going. And this particular video was on planetary atmospheres. We got our first look at a spacecraft in an atmosphere. Now, at the time, the video that showed didn't demonstrate any re-entry effects. It didn't seem to be particularly advanced in terms of modelling, which is perfectly fine. It was an in-house dev build of an entirely new system that was going into the game that we were just getting a look at, first look at it, how it was going, and that it was being a thing. It was under development, which is, it's great. It was being modelled. Wonderful. Awesome. And then we see this Gamescom presentation where we actually watch a full-blown re-entry into the atmosphere. We see the turbulence effects, we see the thermal shockwave across the bow of the ship as it's entering the atmosphere, we see the cool-off, we see that atmospheric flight is not only modelled, it may not be quite finished yet, but it is not only modelled, but there is also cities on the planets, and the terrain for the planets is modelled, and you can land on them. They were demoing us tech that they already had more advanced versions of that they were playing with live, doing the practice for this very presentation. We were only just finding out about something that they must have had finished for months. Which brings me back around to people's assumptions on the development of Star Citizen. Clearly, everything that we currently have access to is well behind where the devs are actually up to. That was pretty much a given. However, it's looking more and more like how far we are behind is significantly larger than was first anticipated. A week ago, I didn't really have much confidence that Squadron 42 would make it by the end of this year. I know they're done with the mocap, I know they have done on most of the voice acting, if not all of the voice acting at this time. Following the tweets, they've pretty much said that that's all done. Most of the script's probably been finished for years at this point. It's just been building the tech and everything else for it. I didn't think it would be ready. I was actually banking for a early mid-2017 release. That's where I thought Squadron 42 would be going at. That puts it at about, Squadron 42 in particular, at about a 5-year development time from the time that it was changed, or the focus of Star Citizen shifted from being just a advanced modern wing commander into being what we know it as today. 5-year development time for a single-player game with an entirely new engine and entirely new assets. That makes sense. That's about the time frame that I was expecting on it. I'm starting to think that we may actually see Squadron 42, not Star Citizen itself, but Squadron 42 by the end of this year, as promised. We may be able to get this by Christmas. It depends on how much Squadron 42 is going to rely on the planetary tech and how many different locations the single-player campaign is going to need. Keep in mind, Squadron 42 is going to be based on a UAE capital ship, as far as we're aware. It's basically going to be Star Citizen Wing Commander. Now, being a fighter pilot based on a capital ship, you're not going to need quite as many locales as you would in something like a persistent universe like Star Citizen will eventually have. So the capital ship needs to be modelled. There will likely need to be some smaller ships modelled, depending on the script. So, for example, if there's a point where, as a UAE pilot that also operates, because there is a first-person shooter module, operates sort of like a marine, you may need to board a civilian vessel for a storyline in one of the missions within the single-player campaign. So that civilian vessel will also need to be modelled. But as you can see, the scope of something like Squadron 42 would be significantly smaller than the Star Citizen MMO persistent universe. And we've seen by this exactly how much more advanced in tech Star Citizen actually is than we thought. Providing Squadron 42 doesn't rely too heavily on too many assets, too many locales and too many planetary locations that are obviously still in the newer part of the development, although significantly further along than we thought, it's entirely possible that most of Squadron 42 could actually be nearly complete at this time, and we wouldn't know. The ships that we've been testing and flying around, the ships that have been made flyable for us within the persistent universe, may not have been made flyable for us. It could be a very specific set of ships that have been selected to make flyable because they needed them tested for the Squadron 42 campaign. I'd like you to notice the sheer volume of military-grade vessels that are currently flyable in comparison to civilian vessels. And even the civilian vessels that are modelled tend to be the military variants of said civilian vessels. At the very least, I'm hoping that this demo that Chris Roberts released at Gamescom this year will put a stop to a lot of the negative spin that has been coming from certain media outlets in regards to Star Citizen. I don't expect it's going to do much about the trolls, the haters in the YouTube comment sections, or anybody who goes by the name Derek Smart, but hopefully this release will get a few of the media outlets to go back to acting impartial as they should have been all along, and obviously it's a great thing for those who have been wondering whether or not Star Citizen's development is ticking along well, who have been iffy about whether or not the project is going to be successful. Well, that one does still remain up in the air, but as you can see development-wise, it appears to be going along just fine. Anyways, ladies and gents, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know in the comment section down below exactly what did you think of the 2016 Gamescom presentation of Star Citizen Patch 3.0. And until next time, click like if you do, subscribe if you want to see more and you haven't already. Fly smart, fly safe, and I will catch you around the verse.